If our speakers are ready, I think in the essence of everyone's time, it's 11. I think we'll get started. Um, welcome all our HR Council folks joining us able to join us remotely here right now, and those joining us in the recording afterwards. Very happy to have HR again continuing to meet virtually into the new year, and we'll continue to do this virtually, obviously until things change. But we're very happy today to have some folks from the One Columbus here to join us today. It's going to be David White, Director of the Workforce and Talent Solutions, and Jay Knox, their Research Manager, both from One Columbus, to talk about, again, kind of give us an overview of things they'll be working on for this year, regional workforce insights, and some trends as well. So without any further ado, I think I'll hand it over first to David.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I just wanted to give a quick thank you to you and to Gus Comstock with Marion for allowing us to present. And I honestly, I want to use this as an opportunity not to just present and leave, but to really engage more with the business community and the workforce community in Marion County and the surrounding areas. I know last year with COVID not being able to travel, we were not able to get out into the actual Columbus region. And make as many visits, and hopefully this year with the vaccine coming out and some safer practices, we'll be able to engage a bit more. So anyways, yeah, let's dive into it. So again, like Matt said, I'm David White. I run our workforce and talent initiatives with One Columbus, and then I'm joined by my colleague Jay Knox, who is going to be diving into some labor insights and workforce insights a little bit later, but we'll go ahead and do a quick One Columbus and Columbus region overview, and then dive into some other things we have for you. But I want to reiterate first and foremost that this can be an engaging and not just me talking. So if anybody has questions, please use the chat feature and throw those in there, and then Jay is going to monitor those while I'm talking, and then I'll do the same for him. Then he can interrupt with those questions, and we can hopefully address those. So if you have questions, please feel free to jump in. And if we don't have the answers now, we're happy to get those and follow up with anybody. And I know Matt is going to send out the slide deck later with our contact info, so you can follow up with us afterwards. So the Columbus region. So we talk about this Columbus region that Marion County right here is part of. But what is the Columbus region? Well, obviously looking there, it's a 11 county geographical area. So it's really Franklin County, anything contiguous, and then Logan, Marion, Morrow, and Knox County as well. So we're 11 counties. And so our organization, One Columbus, that we'll talk a little bit more about, represents that region from an economic development standpoint. But some quick stats about our region. And these are some pretty surprising stats if you've never heard these before. We're #1 in the Midwest from a population, job growth, and a GDP growth standpoint. And we actually have those stats to look at in a little bit. We're a population of 2.2 million people, and we are projected in the next 30 years to grow by an additional 1 million people. And then as we work with businesses that are evaluating our region to potentially open up new operations, we like to describe the region as smart, growing, business-oriented, global, connected, and open. And I could probably talk about those 6 superlatives for 20 minutes. I'm not going to, but happy to have side discussion with anybody if you want to. So again, One Columbus, we are formerly known as Columbus 2020 that you might have heard of before, but we represent 11 counties, but we also represent the state level economic development, which is Jobs Ohio, who is our partner. Now, we as One Columbus, we are a private nonprofit. So we are not a government entity, even though we carry that Columbus name. We are a nonprofit that raises money both from municipal governments through an organization called MODE, which is Mid-Ohio Development Exchange, that Marion Can Do, if you're familiar with them, is a member of that. And so Marion Can Do actually supports our organization, but we're also supported by Jobs Ohio, and we also raise our own funds from private businesses. So anybody from Whirlpool that you're familiar with, all the way to Nationwide Insurance, Huntington Bank, they're all investors that invest in the work that we're doing. Jobs Ohio is the state level economic development organization. And Jobs Ohio is also a private nonprofit. They are actually funded through the state spirituous liquor industry. So anytime you're buying liquor over, I believe it's 80 proof, you're actually supporting economic development in the state of Ohio. So that is a program that was implemented, I believe, in 2010 or 2011 by Governor Kasich when he decided to privatize economic development. And in the state, we've seen some pretty dramatic changes from an economic development standpoint since then. One thing I do want to call out is a lot of times Jobs Ohio gets confused with Ohio Means Jobs. And so just to differentiate those really quick. So Ohio Means Jobs is a state government organization that is basically run through Ohio Department of Job and Family Services and also funded by federal funds. And so that is basically the one-stop job center that also you would go to file for unemployment, and it's also the public job agency. Jobs Ohio is the state level economic development that is not funded by the state government. They work very closely with the state government, but they are a nonprofit. And then the last thing I want to clarify before I kind of get into the meat of this is when we talk about working with businesses, and I might use the term project or client, those are businesses that we're working with. And when I'm talking about those businesses, it's actually a very specific subset of businesses. So we work with organizations that are called or considered economic base. And so economic base, another term to use would be export jobs. So it's really companies that are bringing new money into an area or a region. And so one of the best examples I think I can give is Wendy's, the fast food restaurant. And so Wendy's, as a lot of people know, have their headquarters in Dublin, Ohio. And so we would support Wendy's from a headquarters standpoint, so customer service jobs, R&D, manufacturing, things like that. We would not support the Wendy's fast food restaurant down the street. The difference is because the fast food restaurant is basically recirculating money versus the HQ, which is bringing new money into the region. So that's one example, but another example, an easy one would be manufacturing, logistics, those companies that are a little bit more global. And we believe by supporting those businesses, those generally are higher paying jobs with benefits. Those jobs actually have a multiplier effect to the non-economic based jobs. So if you think about somebody working in manufacturing making $50,000 to $70,000, they're getting excess income to the point where they can then go to the barbershop or the beauty salon or the grocery store, and those jobs then get created. So there's a multiplier effect through that economic base. So that's why we focus on those export jobs that are bringing that new money in, because we believe by supporting those companies and jobs, the other companies will then be lifted up as well. So our vision as an organization that was set out last year when we moved from Columbus 2020 to a new decade and a new vision and mission is to be the most prosperous region in the United States. And so we really want to think through how can we as a region collect resources and work on some of the biggest issues out there. So thinking through equity and inequality, access, transportation. And I think there's a common saying that a rising tide lifts all boats, but I think practically a rising tide lifts a lot of boats. And as our CEO says, that leaves a lot of excess that we can then focus on those folks that are left behind. And so a lot of what we want to do is we want to, as an organization, focus, and our mission that I'll talk about in a second is focusing on our core job, which is really supporting those businesses. And by doing that, then we can also work on the other issues. And workforce is definitely one of those. And within a workforce, there's so many areas that we have room to improve and to help so many people out. And giving somebody a high-paying job with benefits is the best way to do that because it gives them a purpose, it gives them an ability to provide for their family. And then, like I mentioned, our mission, I'm just going to read this off the slide. Our mission is to lead a comprehensive regional growth strategy that develops and attracts the world's most competitive companies, grows a highly adaptive workforce, prepares our communities for the future, and inspires corporate, economic, and public innovation throughout the 11-county Columbus region. So before I move on, does anybody have any questions that's on? Does that make sense? I can only see two people. Do you mind shaking your head if it makes sense? Is there anything that needs clarified? It does. Okay, great. Perfect. All right, I'll keep going. So really quick, just running through some other things. And I want to kind of give that overview, and then I'll get into some more relevant workforce examples. But some of our imperatives for success, we want to sustain economic momentum. So we had a really strong last decade of job growth. Like I mentioned, we're #1 in GDP in the Midwest and economic growth and population growth, but we want to sustain that. We also want to develop, inspire, and attract a talented, adaptive, and diverse workforce. And we believe that's actually not just believe, but it is the most critical location factor for businesses that are evaluating the region. And so when Jay and I are talking to companies that are working on finding some place to open up a new operation, this is the #1 thing that they are concerned about. And a lot of what we do is helping them from a workforce standpoint understand what's here, but also what can we do to help them meet those goals. Enable innovation capacity. We really want to be the most innovative area, and so we are going to be supporting high growth organizations and making sure that ecosystem is in place. And then the last one is increase global identity and connectivity. And so a lot of what we do is marketing the region, both domestically and globally. So we have a lot of activities that we do from a business development standpoint that are getting out there. We actually have, while everybody on the Eastern time zone is sleeping, we have people around the world working on behalf of the Columbus region in target markets, thinking through some of the ones that we work in Europe and in Asia, working to make sure that the Columbus region is known, that if a company wants to invest in the United States, that this is a great place for them to invest. And then we have some other objectives. These are a little boring, I'm not gonna lie, and not relevant. If you wanna get really into them, you can go to our website. They are important, but maybe not for everybody on the call. But one thing I did wanna call out is one of our first objectives is to serve existing businesses. And I think this is a really important thing for a lot of the folks on the call, because you might be at a company that would be engaging with us. And so our organization actually, we have a very standard practice called business retention and expansion calls or meetings. And so what that is for us is it's basically just keeping in regular contact with businesses that are in that economic base and in our targeted industries to make sure we know what's going on. So we really want to keep a pulse on your company and what your needs are so we can support you. And if there is what we would consider a economic development project, so you're committing to creating net new jobs for your company, or if you're going to be modernizing your equipment and purchasing new equipment, those are things that we can actually we can help you with, either by connections to different organizations that can help, or by acquiring incentives through local partners or state partners, in some instances even federal partners or grants. Those are things that we know and we have access to, and where we sit on that regional level, like I mentioned, where we represent both local economic development but also state level, we can give a one-stop experience and kind of tie it all up together and give you that very streamlined experience. But our organization actually talks to 300 to 400 different companies per year, and a lot of instances multiple times we'll talk to those companies and just get general check-ins. And so a lot of times we do have workforce discussions that either are during that we know of, or that come out of that, and that's where I get involved, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm going to skip through some of these just for sake of time, but like I said, our strategic plan is actually on our website, columbusregion.com, and I would recommend going there. There's a lot of great resources. So as far as our goals for the next decade, and this is something that I wanted to mention. So our goals are to create 60,000 net new jobs, acquire $10 billion in investment, and create $3.3 billion in new payroll per year, or I'm sorry, in a 10-year period. So if you do the math, that actually equates out to $55,000 per job, which is also basically around $25 per hour. So those are really high paying jobs, and that does not include benefits. So those are jobs that on an average aggregate scale, they are good high paying jobs. It's not like they're all just $12 an hour logistics jobs. These are a mix. And when you look at our strategic plan, these are ones that we want to focus on and get the whole region involved to help us attract these companies and help companies expand. Like I mentioned earlier, we are a top metro in the Midwest and in the US. And so from a population growth standpoint, you can see the population growth from 2010 to 2019. Columbus leads the Midwest. And you can see some other cities that even Chicago has a negative, almost a neutral population growth. We're at 11.3% over that 10-year period. And then in private sector job growth, we also lead. And those are just some interesting slides of cities that you hear about that you know that are growing, especially in the Midwest. Columbus leads all of those. So I think this is a nice point of pride. And also, honestly, for the HR and recruiting folks on the phone, if you do have to try to recruit somebody from either outside of the region or the state, these are things that you can talk about that there's a reason why we have this job growth. So this is the actual stat, but behind the scenes, there's a story behind why we're having this momentum. And those are things that our organization can help you tell that story. And we have resources, and I know that Gus at Marion can do, and Matt would be happy to connect you to us, and they have some resources as well to help tell that story and build it up. And then I just wanted to give some other quick stats of the region. And I always, so I didn't mention this, but my background is actually private sector human resources and talent acquisition. And I, up until a year and a half ago, I had come to One Columbus meetings when we could have meetings. And I remember seeing this slide, and I never knew this. And it's really interesting. So we are home to, in the Columbus region, 17 companies on the Fortune 1000 list. And Jay, I hope this slide is still up to date, but 17 companies on the Fortune 1000 list. I believe we're one of the highest metros per capita for Fortune 1000 headquarters. And so that's something that's really interesting. And these are a lot of brands that you know, and a lot of them you know that are here. Some of them you don't even know what they do, but I'm sure their products probably impact your life every single day. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and this is another thing that I think is really important from a recruiting standpoint, that we mention a lot, and we also, these are actually slides that we use when we're recruiting companies, but we also have these in some of our people recruiting materials, because when you're recruiting somebody into a job from another region, another state, if you're going into, let's say, advanced manufacturing, I'm an engineer and I want to go work at Whirlpool or work, wherever. I don't necessarily want to go there and uproot my family and go somewhere just because there's this one job. There's obviously other location factors. But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I'm currently at a job. I know there's other jobs around here. If I move to Marysville, Ohio for a job at Honda, who else can I go work for? Well, the great thing about our economy is we first and foremost have a lot of companies in a lot of different sectors, but we also have a lot of different sectors, and we're not too heavy in one area. So generally when our economy is struggling in one area, some other areas might be doing well. And this is a very extremely oversimplified example, but during the pandemic, we saw the automotive supply chain basically come to a screeching halt due to COVID, due to the supply chain going down. There were a lot of furloughs. During that time, our e-commerce and logistics companies were a boom town. I mean, I can't tell you how many companies I was talking to that literally just could not find enough people. They were scraping the bottom of the barrel anywhere they could get people. And I realize, oversimplifying, there's a geographical location issue for some of these, but if I got laid off in manufacturing in Marion or Morrow County, there were jobs available somewhere else that you could go get. Now, obviously, it might not make sense from drive time and all that. We get that. But it's just an oversimplified example of, if one area is not doing well, there are jobs in other sectors that might be doing well to pick up the slack. And so we've been very stable and actually able to bounce back a little bit quicker than some other areas from not just COVID, but also the 2008 crash and some other indicators that we have. I don't think, Jay, that we have any data from that, but there's some lines that we could show you how we usually bounce back a little bit quicker than the national average. And then before I promise this is the last thing until I actually talk about what you all might be interested in, but this is just a quick view of what we did in 2020. It was a terrible year. Everybody knows 2020 was a dumpster fire, and not a lot of people lost their lives, and it's just a very bad situation. But there is some bright news. We actually did have 44 companies commit to projects, and so these are some names of companies you may or may not recognize. I know that everybody's going to at least recognize Amazon, Amazon Web Services, Facebook, and there's some other ones that I could probably talk to you a little bit more about what they do, and you probably like, yeah, I've probably heard of them or maybe read about them in a paper. But 44 company announcements, 3,000 jobs committed, and $1.8 billion in fixed asset investment, which is pretty big. And we think that even though it was a difficult year for a lot of companies, we did entertain a lot of companies that were still moving forward, and a lot of companies that did commit to creating jobs. And we're very proud of that. And we're going to continue to support these companies. So now let's talk about workforce and how, I talked to you about our organization and what we do. So now a little bit more practically why I wanted to give that background, which is, I understand, a long background, but I think it's good to understand. This is where we come in, and I think more specifically, this is where I come in my role from a workforce and talent standpoint. So I break up my role into really 3 different areas. One, under the business support, there's really 2 areas that we support businesses. One is new or expanding companies, getting sometimes job creation incentives, sometimes not, but helping them build plans, helping them understand what the workforce ecosystem looks like, and helping them to basically build out their plan of how they're going to hire people. So if I'm a company that needs to open up an operation and I need to hire 500 people, how am I going to do that when I have maybe my HQ in Topeka, Kansas? I'm opening up an operation and somewhere in Columbus. I don't know the market. I don't know what I'm doing. That's where I come in. Well, I will come in. I will connect them to our ecosystem, our partners, help them build a plan, understand what is going to work, either from a grassroots standpoint, from a marketing and attraction best practice standpoint. But also for existing businesses, this is the second one, for companies that are just here, and this is probably going to be a lot of you, that maybe you're not seeing net new job creation, but you're just here, maybe you're struggling from a workforce standpoint, or you've gotten by. I talk to existing companies all the time, and that's where I mentioned the business retention expansion calls that we have with businesses. I sit in on a lot of those, but I also follow up with a lot of HR folks after those calls. Matt, do you have a question? You popped up as highlighted now. Okay. So I will follow up with those calls, talk to the HR folks, and try to understand what might be some indicators that you're struggling getting workforce. And sometimes that could be pay, and that's something that Jay's going to talk about a little bit later. Sometimes it may just be you don't know that there's better job boards. There are different job boards out there that might be better for your specific employee populations. Maybe there's different areas you haven't thought about recruiting from, different partners that might be able to help you. So I will basically have that call and listen, and then go back to the drawing board and think through the third aspect of my job, which is workforce partners and maintaining relationships with our workforce partners in the region. And this is a way that I break down workforce partners. It's really, it's anybody that has a supply of people that can be put into jobs or trained to be put into jobs. So universities, colleges, higher ed, technical schools, public workforce agencies, veteran services, nonprofits, even private staffing firms if it's a good fit, and K-12 partnerships also. These are just some sample workforce partners. I'm sure a lot of these are going to look very familiar. Ohio Means Jobs, Ramtech, Marion Tech, Greater Ohio Workforce Board, which is the workforce board that's over your Ohio Means Jobs office, Dawson Staffing, Share Mobility, Columbus State. Those are just an example of some of the ones that we work with a lot, and specifically for companies in Marion and surrounding counties. Those are the ones that we lean on the most to help our companies. So to give a quick example or some quick case studies, and I would use logos, but I actually did not, I was not able to acquire permission to use the logos yet. I had a note out and I didn't get that back, but just to quickly give you an idea of 2 different examples, 2 very different examples that cover both what we have done from an incentive standpoint, but also just from a grassroots standpoint. So a lot of you are probably familiar with the giant, I think it's like a 1.2 million square foot Dollar Tree distribution center in Marengo, right off of 71. It is an absolutely massive facility. So that facility was not put there with ease. There was a lot of challenges that went into acquiring the land and making sure the Dollar Tree felt comfortable. But quite honestly, they put their facility in the middle of nowhere. There's really not a lot of people around there. The nearest town would be Marengo, which is not big. Cardington is kind of close by. Mount Gilead's kind of close by, but still a little bit of a drive. So there's not a lot of people, and they were putting in a minimum job commitment of 450 people over a 3-year period, but really up to 800 people. So we had to all but guarantee we will find people for you. And so they were given an incentive by Jobs Ohio. It's a program, it's a very selective program for situations like this called Talent Acquisition Services, that's given to job creation projects that are in difficult situations. And so with this project, we instituted a lot of different tactics. And honestly, a lot of those tactics were very grassroots. And so it wasn't doing these like really, we didn't have recruiters out there sourcing candidates. These are just normal jobs and normal people, and we used really simple ways to find people and engage people. So from a grassroots perspective, we had open hiring events at the Ohio Means Jobs office in Mount Gilead. So we worked with one of the the business services folks. His name's Eric Uday. He's absolutely fantastic. For anybody that maybe is familiar with the Morrow County area, I highly recommend their job center. I know that Marion County is America's workforce development capital, and your OMJ office is second to none. But the Morrow County one is also fantastic. They were instrumental in helping us not only use their space for hiring events, but we also thought outside the box. And we went to where people were, because we understood that sometimes people can't just up and leave their kids to go to a hiring event. So we actually went into different communities, to different libraries, and had open hiring events in those libraries. I realized that that was before we had to wear masks, so it's a little bit difficult now to do that. But we would have people come in, open interviews. People could do their drug testing on site, and they could actually literally get a contingent job offer same day, and be at the facility working within a week or two once it opened. And so we instituted that with the help of Ohio Means Jobs. We also had some really interesting job posting tools. We utilize a program or a tool called Job Target, that basically is a programmatic job posting tool that has artificial intelligence that learns how candidates are engaging with your job postings, and then uses that data to then adjust going forward. So let's say that for some reason the Dollar Tree jobs happen to get a lot of success on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock in the morning for whatever reason. It would actually invest more money for you automatically into doing like sponsored job postings on Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning on Indeed or on Monster or whatever site that is. And so it takes a lot of the guesswork out for you. We also worked with them in their national marketing team to develop marketing assets. We did some billboards, there were radio ads, and a lot of targeted marketing. We did USPS direct mailers and and you would be surprised at how many people came in with a direct mailer that was sent to their house and said, hey, I got this in my house. I drive to Knox County to Mount Vernon to work at Ariel. I want to work closer to home. Let's get me a job closer to home. And we also implemented some leadership training for them. So we actually worked with I believe it was Tri-Rivers actually, to develop a leadership training program, and also Crown Lift Truck in Columbus to do forklift training for their employees to basically help offset some of those costs and really take the burden off of their team as they're trying to open up this new facility. They don't want to have to worry about a lot of these things. So that program takes a lot of that burden off. Now, completely switching gears, something that is not incentivized at all, but this was just me doing my job, helping an existing company. So there's a company in London, Ohio called Nissan Chemetech, you may or may not be familiar with them, but they do plastic injection molding. I think they're a tier 1 auto supplier. and their CEO, actually, for any manufacturer out there that are familiar with COMP, the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership, their CEO, Sean Hendricks, is actually also the president of COMP is the CEO of Nissan Chemetech. And Sean called me, and he had a BRE, Business Retention Expansion, call with our local partner in Madison County, David Kell. And he was saying, basically, we can't find people. I can hire 50 people today just to go out and work the line. I don't care, as long as they can pass a drug test. And even if they fail on certain things, I'll still hire them. I'm so desperate for people. We're getting lenient. We're hiring people under 18. If they have permission, like we're hiring people, like it doesn't matter. So we went to the drawing board and looked at where are you getting people from right now? What pools of talent are you getting from? And what we found out is there were some untapped talent pools that were ready to work, that were actually from the new American population in Columbus. So a lot of people don't realize that Central Ohio is one of the biggest targets for certain populations from a relocation standpoint, from a refugee directly, but also secondarily, a lot of folks migrate to Columbus. So let's say if I'm from Somalia and I'm here on refugee status and I get assigned to Atlanta, for whatever reason, Columbus is a market that a lot of people come to after they come to that Atlanta, they move to Columbus as well. So we have a lot of organizations that are actually like grassroots organizations. So Jewish Family Services is the example I'm going to use, but also an organization called CRIS, Community Refugee Immigration Services. And they both have workforce development programs, and they work with people to help them with English skills and job skills. But a lot of times you're getting people that may have been a doctor or an attorney in another country. They come to the US and they just need a job, and they're willing to do anything to provide for their family and to establish themselves. So a lot of times you're getting really highly educated people. A lot of times their English skills are really good. They just struggle getting work and kind of acclimating. And so these organizations have workforce development programs that we work with a lot to make connections to businesses. But what they also do, it's really important, is help companies with training their teams to adapt to different cultures. And so if somebody's coming in from a different culture, and a supervisor doesn't understand that maybe somebody comes from a certain background where they have to pray often, or they don't say certain words, or they don't interact in a certain way, those are things that these organizations can also do. So Jewish Family Services actually came into Nissan, and they did a site audit. They helped them do some training with supervisors. And then also there was a little bit of a spatial mismatch of some of the candidates coming from central to east to northeast Columbus to London, Ohio. So we worked with another organization called Share Mobility, which you can see their logo here. So Share is an organization that's a transportation solution. So they work with companies. In this specific example, they worked with Nissan Chemetech to essentially provide a shuttle from a certain neighborhood or from a certain pickup point out to their facility. So they were able to get people from one place to another using Share. And then this organization found really highly qualified people that were willing to work to go out to this facility. Now, another thing we did is we connected Nissan to a second chance hiring organization called Damascus Second Chance Hiring. So what Damascus does, they actually work with low-level offenders in the prison system to give them job training and then make connections for when they get out. It essentially works like a private staffing firm. They provide the transportation and all that. So Nissan was able to fill a lot of their workforce gaps up until there was then a microchip shortage, and now their hiring is paused because of that supply chain getting thrown off, unfortunately. But I had an email exchange with Sean last week, and he couldn't have been more happy with the solutions. And that's just a small example of what we can do on an aggregate scale with our connections and ability to facilitate with workforce partners on a regional level to be able to solve some of these issues.
Jay, there was one question in there for David.
Yeah, David, I think I just want a clarification on what that last program you mentioned was with I believe it's probably related to the low-level offenders.
Yeah, so there's actually two organizations that are essentially private for-profit organizations. One is called Damascus Second Chance Hiring, and the other one is called CEO Works, Center for Employment Opportunities. And if you want to email me at dw@columbusregion.com, and Matt will send out my contact info, I can actually directly connect you to those organizations. And there's also another organization that works out of the Franklin County Job Center that also does second chance hiring. So there's a few different resources, but send me a note and then I'll definitely connect you. Okay, so Jay, I'm going to kick this over to you, and I will drive the PowerPoint. But just to give a quick intro, so a lot of times when we are talking to companies as a follow-up, there is certain data that we looked at that I mentioned. A lot of times it is wage data, but there's other things that we can use from a data standpoint to find new sources of talent. And so I'm going to have Jay run through some things, and I might interrupt him as I tend to do. But Jay is the data guru on our team, and he actually he does data in a lot of ways, specifically for our client services team, either for companies that are evaluating the region. He will pull data to understand what the current workforce is, really looking into anything that a company might want to know. But also for existing companies, he looks up wage data all the time. He knows the trends. I think he's going to look into that a little bit. So Jay, I am ceding the floor over to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think here we just want to provide you guys as up-to-date data as possible with what's going on in the economy. Obviously, it's been a wild year to say the least. And I think we're starting to see some trends and get some insights, at least from some of the data. So we picked out some points here I think would be interesting to the group as HR professionals. So we kind of wanted to go through those. First, job posting. So we subscribe to a tool called Burning Glass. It's actually a tech company. They have like an algorithm that scrapes job postings, but this allows us to track job postings in our region. And our region includes Marion County, but at a region level, this is what we saw in 2020. Obviously, we started out the year strong, as David mentioned, having the momentum coming in from the last decade. And you saw the clear drop there in April or May. And I was actually following this, and what we noticed was that job didn't last long. Our total posting volume quickly went back up almost to levels it was prior to the shutdown in March. And back to David's point, I think we quickly realized that as we looked in those postings, a lot of it was around logistics, manufacturing, and basically anything related to essential goods. So e-commerce, and then even with like food and restaurants, while there was layoffs, there was a big uptick in demand for delivery drivers, fast food, and things like that. So clearly, since then, logistics and manufacturing have kind of continued to stay level with lots of posting activity. I think what we're closely monitoring next is what happens with IT and finance, as some of those postings are still below what we would previously see in years past, but we're kind of watching to see when those start spiking up again as kind of an indication that some of our key economic base employers in those fields are starting to hire again. In terms of the labor force, so the key here is that our labor force right now is about 50,000 people below what we would expect it to be. And labor force is defined as you're employed and you're unemployed. So basically anyone that's actively seeking work. So I think where this is interesting is for the first time in a long time in our region, we have a little bit of slack in the labor force, meaning that there's essentially 50,000 people on the sidelines right now that had previously been working that we assume still are in the region that at some point would be likely to come back to the labor force, given the right job, the right location, the right opportunity. But as have seen in the news, I mean, this has been sort of an uneven jog back to normal. It kind of goes up, it goes down, but we're still sitting at a labor force right now that is similar to what we saw 3 years ago in the region. So digging a little further into by county, and this is unemployment claims activity. So this is the 11 counties in the Columbus region. I highlighted Marion, but basically it's looking at initial employment claims and continued. as a percentage of the labor force. This is sort of giving us a proxy for unemployment rate, or what we can maybe use to predict the unemployment rate, since that data tends to lag. But as of the latest data, mid-January, Marion's ratio of claims to labor force is sitting at 3.8%. And that's actually up, and we've seen this across the region. There's been another increase in unemployment claims since December. And Marion, while these are all pretty close together, I mean, besides Franklin, Marion's the highest county right now in terms of its percentage of claims relative to its labor force. So on the next slide, David, if you want to move on. This is looking specifically at Marion County. And by the way, if anyone, please stop me if anyone has questions on any of these slides or needs to look at them closer. I'm glad to go in more detail. But this is essentially showing you since the beginning of the year, unemployment rate and claims activity in Marion County. So, you see the big spike March 21st, initial claims, and then it went all the way up to a high of 17.5% unemployment in Marion. And we saw in our region, the counties that tend to have a much larger manufacturing or automotive share of industry to be the highest in terms of the quick unemployment rate. I think this relates a little bit to what David touched on earlier with the furloughs and the automotive supplier shutdowns. But as the year went on, it steadily declined. And you can see the red bar, which is new unemployment claims, essentially sort of disappeared up until November, December, where it's starting to go up again. But currently, Marion County is sitting at an unemployment rate of 5.2%. And based on the activity of claims that's increased since that data is released, we might expect that to go up a little bit further here when we get the new unemployment data. Okay, so switching gears a little bit to Marion specific workforce, we thought some of this would be interesting for you guys to see in terms of Marion's labor force and commute patterns. So this is using a US Census tool called On the Map, which is actually free online, and we're glad to send you a link or do a demo. But this is looking at inflow and outflow commute patterns for Marion County. So there's almost 25,000 people that are employed in Marion County. And of that, 13,000 are commuting into the county every day for work, and 12,000 are both living and working in the county. And then also there's 15,600 people that leave Marion County every day for work. So the big takeaway from this is there's actually more people that leave Marion every day for work than come in. So when you think about, talent attraction, I think David might be able to expand on this a little bit. I think there's an opportunity to, attract new workers that are leaving the county to a job that's closer to home.
Jay, how does that compare to other counties around us, or Delaware or others?
That's a great question. I can pull the information easily. I don't know it off the top of my head, so I don't want to give you a number that's incorrect. But I would sense you would probably still see some difference. We do know we do have some counties where more people live and work than leave. Delaware County would probably be an interesting one to look at to start based on its proximity to Franklin. I'm guessing that more people leave Delaware County to Franklin, but I'd have to look at the numbers.
Yeah, and we've looked at this data with a lot of our local partners, and it is a challenge that you do have a lot of people leaving, and a lot of times it's just because there's opportunities that are better matches for them in Columbus, or basically, Columbus is kind of that magnet that everybody sort of goes to. But there's one thing that Jay can show in a minute that shows a heat map of where people live that work in Marion and vice versa. But like Jay was saying, this is really important data for you as a company to understand, or even the chamber as an aggregate for companies to think through, what are ways that we can engage the folks that are leaving, maybe understand why are you leaving? Why can't we get more people to stay here? And that might be a great way to find new pools of workforce that maybe are leaving because they don't know that there are jobs that exist here that are a really good match for them. And so those are some things that we would look at talking to individual companies, but you can also work on them as an aggregate. And I think that's the great thing about having organizations like Chambers of Commerce or industry sector partnerships to work on those issues as an aggregate, because when you pool resources, you can make a lot bigger impact.
So moving on, David just mentioned this. So for those 13,000 people that commute into Marion County, this is a density map showing where they live. So the darker the color purple there, the more people live in that area. And this is, I think these are really cool maps, and these are come in handy when we're working on projects with companies that are, looking to site a new operation and understand where the labor is coming from in those areas. But for Marion County, I listed there the top areas of employment draw, so where employees live, and this is based on cities. You could also look at this at like a zip code level, for example. But Marion, obviously Marion City, and then Columbus is the second largest bucket of where people live that work in Marion. A lot of that is sort of in the northern suburb areas. But that little map on the inset at the bottom showing the direction that most people working in Marion are coming from the south or the east or northeast. And the east, I believe, would be the Morrow areas, and then northeast a lot. Bucyrus and Mansfield are two of the top areas that people are living that are commuting into Marion. And also, most notably too, for the people that work in Marion, I feel like they are coming from relatively close by. It looks like over 60% of the people live less than 24 miles from Marion County. But there's still a sizable portion that are commuting, 25 or 50 miles. But a majority of people are coming from Marion or the closely surrounding areas.
Stop me if this is going to be something you'll get into, but seeing the geographically knowing where folks are coming in from, should that tell an employer to then focus marketing on getting more employees from those areas, or should they go the opposite direction and go, oh, that tells me there's an untapped pool that I might want to look at marketing more in the opposite direction of where the heat maps are showing?
Honestly, I think it could be both, and that is something that we look at for companies in Columbus that are pulling people from areas like Marion or maybe Southern Ohio, thinking through strategies of, okay, I'm pulling. So here's a real example. There's a manufacturer in Central Columbus, very close to German Village, actually, that is an auto supplier that has like 10 people come from New Lexington, which New Lexington, I actually used to do the drive from German Village to New Lexington every day because I work down there. It's about an hour and 15 minutes each way, and they're coming up for those jobs. And I was like, look, if you already have that many people coming up here, there's a reason they're coming up here. There's probably more of them. Why don't you work with Share Mobility to offer a transportation solution and get a van full of 20 or 30 people? Like, you already have that amount of people, and there's people down there in New Lexington and Perry County that have those skills clearly, that are looking for work, and they're willing to drive and live in one area and drive to another area. So there's one example, but I think another example is looking at areas where I don't have or for other ways of engaging people that maybe are leaving, but they don't want to leave. They want to stay close to home because maybe they want to drop their kids off at the school bus or whatever. They don't want all that drive time. That's another area. So it really depends on the person you're trying to engage and what their situation is. But I think both are valid tactics that you could take and think through.
At least would, I think, be a good question to look into deeper. So you might look at, who those people are or what types of jobs or occupations are in those areas. And maybe you can realize if it would be a good fit, or if you're having really good success in one of those areas, maybe you could use that info to find an area within a similar commute that has a similar composition demographically in terms of the types of occupation, and use that, as David mentioned, as like go one step further after you look at that data and develop like a targeted marketing plan or a mailer or something along those lines.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this map is basically the exact opposite of the other slide, showing the other direction, so where people work that live in Marion. And this is based on the little directional inset map at the bottom. And it is predominantly toward the south to Columbus, and that is a lot of it Marysville, Delaware, Dublin, Westerville, I think, are some of the top areas. And these maps you can use, if you look closely, you can usually see, it's like you see the darker dots. I can't move my cursor, but in Marysville at Honda, those ones around Delaware, I think, are in those large industrial parks by the airport there. The little dot north of the 270 symbol is the Chase facility off of McCoy that employs like 10,000 people on location. And then even Ohio State, I think you see on there a little bit. But I think the most interesting thing from this is when you look at the commute distance, you see almost 27 people commuting 25 to 50 miles. So that's almost the opposite of the people that are from the previous slide that tended to live closer. For the people commuting out of Marion, they tend to be going longer distances. And as David mentioned, it might be worth trying to figure out, why they're doing that. And maybe even in the times we're in with remote work and things changing a little bit with the travel, maybe people now would be more interested in a job that's closer to home. And so this is just another example of some of the data tools that we have and what we do. This is running a drive time from downtown Marion. And this actually uses like an actual drive time distance. So you can put in like the average commute, and this is done at like 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. So this is how far you can get to in 15, 30, and 45 minutes from Marion. And what we realize is that if you overlaid this on top of that density map, it roughly lines up with where people live. So most people that are working in Marion are generally within 45-minute drive time area. And then, there's a significant population. If you see on that chart, within 45 minutes, you're pushing nearly 500,000 population, with a lot of people may not realize with how far north Marion is, but you're still have a significant labor pool draw in the area. And, we can run this from specific business locations, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, what have you, but this is sort of an example of some of the data and analysis tools that we have and we use when working with existing companies and in the attraction of new companies to the region. And last but not least, I just wanted to do a quick look at today, as is the latest. Now, this is government data that we sourced from MZ, but it's based on BLS, of the top 15 largest occupations in Marion County. And this is from a detailed SOC level. And I put the jobs, the median in the 75th percentile, and we will be sending out this presentation. So don't feel like you need to scramble down and write some of these wages down. But this is based on just on the pure number of workers in these categories, what the largest positions are. And you see assemblers and fabricators at the top, but then also your fast food, janitor, retail, which is normal in most areas. What I will point out here is that I pulled the median and the 75th percentile. I think what we've noticed is that in the tight labor market, at least leading up to the pandemic, that it was really helpful to see the 75th percentile wage, as that was often more of a target of what you might need to pay in an area to get that sort of top talent or attract someone as switching a job over to you, not just the average or the median, but what are we looking at the 75th? And I highlighted the laborers and freight and stock material movers category there. That's essentially your distribution worker. And as you can see, the 5th percentile is, and this is based on primarily on BLS data from 2019, so it's not even necessarily current, is pushing that $17 an hour boundary. And that's what we've seen. And we started looking at Burning Glass in terms of advertised job postings. And we've seen job postings for distribution workers go up at least $1 a year for the last 4 or 5 years. And at one point in the fall here, we were seeing like an average posted wage of $19 an hour for a distribution center worker. And that's down in mostly in, Metro Columbus and some of those heavy distribution center areas, and heavily driven by Amazon. If you take Amazon out of those postings, they go down. But I think where that becomes important is we've started to see and get calls from, manufacturers that are seeing pressure on their wages. As you see, the assemblers and fabricators median wage there is 16. If the distribution center down the street is suddenly offering, 18 or 19, it's getting tougher for some of these manufacturers or other employers with lower level, low skilled jobs to keep pace with some of these employers. And this is where we can provide some value to businesses. We've helped provide HR professionals with, comps for certain positions or real-time as possible data in the region to help them make a case to their management that they think they need to increase, wages at their company. And one last thing, and David might have some more insight into this too, is we do reference employer-based surveys. And right now, the government data seems to lag as, kind of what a real-time wage is. And we have areas around Rickenbacker, and I think Madison County even does one where counties or groups of people get together and do like an annual survey of their employers and get a sense for, what wages are being paid, and then also what benefits, which also comes into play, sign-on bonuses, 401k matches, things like that. So this is just another sort of example of, the data that we have, and some interesting things that we're noticing from our perspective in the region with our employers. David, I didn't know if you had anything to add to that or not, but.
No, I don't think so. That, like you said, that has been a big one this past year, is having to look at, because like you were saying, our labor force participation has gone down significantly. I mean, even a few points is a significant amount of people in the labor force. And because of that, companies have had to get more creative on what they're offering to employees, either from a just raw salary standpoint, or different benefits, flexibility, flexible schedules, things like that. And it's going beyond the typical barriers of, childcare and things like that. And it could just be insurance changing to offering it, after day one instead of a 30-day or 90-day elimination period. But a lot of it is wages, and some companies are instituting what they call like COVID pay or pandemic pay, where they were temporarily increasing $1 or $2 an hour, or doing different things like sign-on bonuses, like Jay said, or upping their referral bonuses and being more flexible with those. So we've seen a lot of different things, and that's the value that we can add to companies, either our organization, our local partners at the Chamber, or at Marion can do. We're happy to have those conversations with you, either as a whole organization, or individually as organizations. But please use us, reach out to us, and we're happy to have those conversations and provide as much data and insight as we can.
There might be other questions, but I had one, and you're going to probably say it varies a lot. But what are some of the best strategies that you've utilized to help employers attract employees? Is it billboards? Is it making sure they're posting on Indeed, or what's some of the hot ways that folks can attract and get in front of potential employees?
Honestly, it depends on what type of employer, where they're located. There's so many different factors, but if I'm just going to pick, let's just say a company, I'm going to say pays average, $15 to $20 an hour. Right now, it's difficult to find people. I'm going to be completely honest, and there's not really a one size fits all answer, but I think just getting down to a grassroots perspective and just putting your mind into an employee's, like, what do I value? What am I thinking through? Is it just going to be money in this area? And it depends on the area as well. And every area in our region, it is easy for us to call, the Columbus region, but we also understand practically that Marion is an hour drive north of Columbus, and it's just different, and your labor pool is different. The jobs are different than you're going to get downtown Columbus, and we recognize that. So some of the tactics might be different, and the job boards are different, but I can't really give a simple answer, but I will say that there are different job boards that work well for different companies. And honestly, you could probably Google that and find, for a manufacturing job, these are the best job boards. Indeed is great. ZipRecruiter is great. Monster, there's the big ones. LinkedIn is not going to be good unless you're hiring somebody probably with a bachelor's degree. It's just not a good use of resources. But also, Ohio Means Jobs. I can't give a plug enough for the county Ohio Means Jobs offices, especially Marion County. They have, honestly, there's a reason why Gus Comstock applied to call Marion America's Workforce Development Capital, because I've been on several calls or in-person site visits with that team and with Tri Rivers and Marion Tech, and you really have some absolutely incredible world-class people doing workforce development to solve issues together as a team. And so I would reach out to all the resources and just understand who those people are. And if you're not connected to them, they want to connect, and they want those business relationships, because it helps them get better as well.
Roxanne and her team are amazing. You're right, they do amazing work there. Another side question I had, just in terms of the regions. So there's one Columbus, right? And you mentioned like southeastern economic development, those folks. how do you and those other regions interact with each other, and to talk about globally, like Ohio as in attracting folks from outside of Ohio? What does that partnership look like? Or is there double counting in terms of, if someone's commuting into another region, are you both counting those as job creations in both regions, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so it's a weird relationship. So we have the Jobs Ohio network that is the 6 regions like you're mentioning. So you have Ohio Southeast, that is the biggest. You have Team NEO, which is Northeast Ohio, Regional Growth Partnership in the Northwest around Toledo, Dayton Development Coalition, and then Ready Cincinnati. So really around the bigger metros. And I would say we have kind of a love-hate relationship because we are competing for those jobs. And so a job only counts once. And so if there's a multi-regional project, Jobs Ohio actually takes the lead on it because we would otherwise get in a fighting match over that company. So Jobs Ohio will take the lead on it, but we also are amicable, especially my role. So my role actually exists in every region. There's one of me. And so actually, if you have a company that has operations in one county to the west, then I actually have a peer that I could connect you with that does the exact same thing. I get along really well with all those people. I know Jay with the research folks gets along really well. But at the end of the day, we are competing for jobs. From a Ohio standpoint, Jobs Ohio really takes the lead on that. And I would say that we didn't get into all the data, but Columbus is leading the state in all categories. I mean, we looked at population growth and job growth and GDP growth. We are leading the state, and we also are importing a lot of talent from the state. Actually, we're talking about the employee or the population growth. I think most of our population is from interstate or intrastate, Jay. I think we pulled mostly from Columbus or from Cleveland and Cincinnati, I believe, but we have a heat map that we can add to the slide deck as well before we send it over, Matt. I think is also interesting to look at of where people are migrating from. But Jobs Ohio is the one that kind of sells Ohio, but we're the ones that sell Columbus. And we really like, Ohio, it's great. We love Ohio, but at the same time, we want people to come to Columbus, and that's what we're focused on. But Jobs Ohio is marketing Ohio for certain things. So one example I have is there's a website called findyourohio.com. And this is something that Jobs Ohio is doing on an active marketing standpoint in select markets. They have 5 tech jobs that are super in demand through market research. And basically, if a candidate, so there's a marketing campaign that drives candidates to this website in select cities. So think the San Francisco Bay Area, Research Triangle, the Northeast and certain cities, Texas, Atlanta. And they are doing active marketing campaigns to sell Ohio, driving candidates to the site. They also have a recruiting firm on the back end that once a candidate applies, that recruiting firm calls on behalf of Ohio, pre-screens the candidate, and then plays matchmaker for those in-demand jobs. And so that's one example of how they're kind of promoting Ohio. And a candidate can say, I'm interested in Columbus or Cleveland. And maybe there's somebody that went to University of Cincinnati or went to Ohio State. They went to the Bay Area for a job. They want to come back and start a family and have a lower cost of living or whatever that situation is. We're also probably going to be doing the same thing for biotech and for life sciences, because that is a big area in Ohio that we're focusing on. That is something that we're seeing a lot of momentum for. So Jobs Ohio is also thinking about doing essentially the same thing, but for different very in-demand industries that have super high-paying jobs. That talking about that multiplier effect, obviously the higher paying the job, the more sub jobs are created underneath, because the more excess income somebody has, that they can pay for more carpenters and more beauticians or whatever those extra jobs are, because they have that excess income.
Back to that matchmaker process. How does a Marion business make sure that they're one of the potential sites that those matchmakers are trying to attract folks to? How do they make sure that they're known? Or is it automatically through their partnership or knowledge of what Can Do has than yours? Or how does someone just make sure that they're part of that conversation?
Yeah, are you talking about the Find Your Ohio platform?
Right, or I guess any time that you folks are talking to and trying to match up potential employees with employers.
Yeah, so that program is one specific example for tech jobs, and I know a lot of manufacturers have tech jobs, and so that is a conversation. Either go through Gus at Marion can do, or contact us directly. Right now it's only open to companies that have had a recent project with Jobs Ohio, but it will be opened up at some point to other companies as well. But the qualifications would be they have to be economic based and they have to be hiring those specific jobs. But outside of that, I mean, we want more companies to land. We're getting a lot of candidates into the portal. Actually, with a very limited budget, they already got like 400 candidates in a few months. So there's a lot of activity happening. But for other campaigns, yeah, just connect with the local economic development or connect with us, and we're happy to have those conversations and make sure that you're connected. And honestly, we also will probably be doing some workforce programming this year, and so we would love to invite any employers at the table to come to those meetings where we gather and have some sort of program. We did not do anything last year due to the pandemic, but we will be picking that back up this year as well.
Yeah, David, Jay, you guys did a great job. Very good presentation. And one thing I am wondering about, and I don't know if this falls under your umbrella or not, but there is a huge housing issue for these in all these areas. You talk, Columbus, I don't know, I'm familiar with Columbus, but most of our jobs are up here in Marion, Upper Sandusky, Wyandotte County, whatnot. And there's just a shortage of housing in general. And there's no way for these areas to grow and help attract and to keep the people here without the housing. Whose umbrella does that fall under? Is that the local ED group that handles that? Is that things you guys stay away from? Maybe a little insight there would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And Jay, feel free to add in. So affordable housing and housing in general are two completely separate conversations, but also it's housing. So one issue we have in Metro Columbus and some of the other areas, not even Metro Columbus, where there's high density of employers, specifically in let's call them lower wage jobs. Affordable housing is a big issue because you're having to pull people from 30, 60 minutes away because they can't afford to live in a certain area where the jobs are. But housing supply right now is an issue. Jay might have more insight into this. It's something that we are involved in, and we as an organization are pressuring to get more spec homes or more supply just built in general. But there's a lot of factors that go into why houses aren't being built. And that could be down to a city council issue of zoning issues. It could be utility issues. There's a lot of issues that go into it on a local level. And I remember being at a call after I had started with the organization, had no idea what was going on. I was in Licking County, just east of Columbus, and people were asking about housing supply. And it's like, why aren't new houses being built? And then we had a developer get on and talk about all the different challenges they have. They would love to just go build houses. Problem is, getting the land is really difficult. Getting approval to build the houses, getting the utilities and all that stuff is really difficult. Right now, there's a big issue with the supply chain of getting building materials. It's really expensive to build houses right now because supply chain is so backed up. I was actually, my first site visit in 6 months, I was at a manufacturer in Johnstown in Licking County. And they've had products sitting on the shelf, or they have literally product, one to go to Australia, one to go to, I think, Thailand, one to go to Japan, has been sitting there for 3 months because they just can't get shipping containers because all the shipping ports are backed up. They just can't get a container to get the product out. So that's another, there's a lot of issues that go into it. Jay, do you have, that's something that the research team also looks at.
Yeah, I think we play more of an advocate role around that. So we can't have direct influence, but we have a lot of information and knowledge that can help push for new housing. So just quickly from a research perspective, I know I help a lot with, developers who will ask for data around employment or jobs in an area that they can use to pitch their case that they need more housing. So we could supply data on major employers, within a 5 or 10 mile radius, information from our project announcement saying, hey, there's 3,000 new jobs being committed in this area over the next 3 years. And they take that information back to get approval to move some of these projects forward. And then our leadership team obviously we're concerned about the housing issue because that is also a jobs issue and economic development issue. And from, a legislative standpoint or a local standpoint, our leadership team gets involved in those conversations to help push forward, or advocate for the housing development issues.
Yeah, I think I'd speak for many, and I think we'd be interested in seeing numbers from Marion County that could help support the creation of additional affordable housing in this area. And I will say to Joe's question that the Chamber has made it a big picture initiative for ours since I think 2017. The number of delinquent and blighted properties in Marion County has been over 1,000 properties identified. So those can all be essentially potential cheap, land that could be turned into some positive use or positive land development if those homes were torn down or blight was removed. So that's one piece of a much larger puzzle that we've been working on for many years now. And there's been some positive movement in that, but I think another piece of it comes from state and federal monies to help demo some of these properties as well. But having data behind us to say there's actually here's a need right here. Other than, I mean, Joe is not wrong. This is stuff that we've been hearing anecdotally, but if there's hard data behind it that shows that'd be very interesting, I think.
It seems like right now, most of the growth is all in the big C's. It's, Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland is where you see those communities growing, and the rest of the state is just kind of stagnant, from my travels and whatnot. But yeah, great points all the way around today, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, to echo Joe, David and Jace, thank you so much. Great presentation, some great material. And as you've mentioned throughout this, we'll be providing our HR council, not just those that are on the call, but our entire HR council this recording and any handouts as you folks provide to us, links, and of course your contact information after the recording's done. So thank you again. And with that, we'll see all of HR folks in the next month. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yep.